The first American National Racing Championship, organised by the American Automobile Association, was held in 1909. In those pioneering years, races were held on loose surface road circuits and oval dirt tracks. By the 1920s, the rough road circuits were replaced by races on board speedways. But the Wall Street crash in 1929 brought about the demise of the wooden tracks. The Depression also caused manufacturer interest in racing to dwindle, bringing about a rise to prominence by specialist builders. Most notable was Harry Miller, a dominant force in the 1920s and 30s. Miller's engine designs, later developed by Fred Offenhauser and Dale Drake, continued to win races until the 1970s. The post-war years saw the development of the classic Roadster IndyCar. Heavyweight, 400 horsepower, front-engined cars, which would dominate the national championship for almost 20 years. The disaster at the 1955 Le Mans 24-hour race, in which over 80 spectators were killed, caused the American Automobile Association to abandon its racing activities. From 1956, the United States Automobile Club, USAC, took over the organisation of the national championship. In the 1950s, more paved ovals began to appear, and in 1957, the indycars made their first visit to Europe, when a 500-mile event was held on the steeply banked track at Monza in Italy. By the late 1950s, lightweight rear-engine cars had begun to win the Formula One races, while the front-engine roadsters remained dominant in America. But a great change was coming. In 1961, Cooper, the reigning Grand Prix champions, brought an adapted version of their Formula One car to the Indianapolis 500 and caused a sensation by finishing 9th overall. Over the next 3 years, the USAC establishment, with its roadster tradition, fought a fierce rearguard action against the European invaders and their funny little cars. The fate of the roadsters was sealed in 1965, when Jim Clark, driving a Lotus, won the Indianapolis 500. The victory was the first by a rear-engined car and also the first by a non-American driver for nearly 50 years. Graham Hill's Indianapolis victory the following year would be the last by a foreign driver for over 20 years. The 1960s was also a time of technical experimentation. Gas turbine-powered cars came very close to winning at Indianapolis in 1967 and 68 before new rules effectively outlawed such engines. Aerofoils began to appear on Indy cars in 1969 and soon reached outrageous proportions before regulations to curb rapidly increasing lap speeds were introduced, trimming wings to dimensions comparable with those of Formula One cars. Dirt track races were phased out of the championship in 1970, since when races have been held exclusively on paved ovals, road courses and street circuits. In the 1970s, race-winning designs were produced by American constructors, such as Eagle, Parnelli and Coyote, while European interests were represented by British builders Lola and McLaren. In 1975, Cosworth Engineering produced a turbocharged version of its famous Ford DFV Grand Prix engine for IndyCar racing, which became the dominant power unit of the following decade. In 1978, the IndyCars made their first, and so far only, visit to Britain when races were held at Silverstone and Brands Hatch. 1979 saw a major change in the organisation of the IndyCar series when an association of team owners, the Championship Auto Race Teams, or CART, took over from USAC. In the same year, ground effect aerodynamics, originally developed in Europe by Colin Chapman and the Lotus Grand Prix team, were introduced to IndyCar racing on the John Barnard-designed Chaparral. The 1980s witnessed the rise to dominance of the Chevrolet engine, designed and built by the British Ilmore Company, overthrowing the Ford Cosworth engine. As the decade progressed, increasing costs of car design and development put the self-build option beyond the means of most teams. As a result, IndyCar racing has, with the notable exception of the Penske team, which has built its own cars since the late 1970s, become largely a customer car formula. Initially, the market was dominated by the British company March Engineering, but in recent years another British company, Lola Cars, have become the main car supplier in IndyCar racing. In 1993, apart from Penske, who will also supply a small number of customers, and the Ray Hall Hogan team, which has taken over the True Sports project, all the IndyCar teams will use the Lola chassis, while a new Ford Cosworth engine will challenge the supremacy of the Ilmore Chevrolet in the engine war. The Newman Haas racing team was formed for the 1983 IndyCar Championship Series. Partners Paul Newman, the Hollywood film actor, and Carl Haas, a dealer in racing cars since the 1950s, had been rival team owners in the Can-Am Sports Car Championship Series for several years before joining forces. Both men had raced themselves, Haas in American national sports car events in the 50s, while Newman competed impressively in Trans Am touring car events in America until the mid-1980s. But his most publicised achievement was a second-place finish in the Le Mans 24-hour race in 1979. Newman also won the Indianapolis 500, although this was when he was playing the leading role in the 1969 movie, Winning. Carl Haas became the North American agent for Lola Cars in 1968 and has run a factory-supported team for the constructor each year since then. Initially, the Haas Lolas ran in the original Can-Am series until its demise in 1974. The team then became front-runners in the Formula 5000 single-seater category until it was replaced by a revived Can-Am championship, which the Haas team won 4 years running from 1977 to 1980. For the move into IndyCars in 1983, Newman Haas ran a new Lola, the company's first IndyCar design since 1978. Multiple national champion Mario Andretti was signed up as the driver, and the following year the team won the IndyCar championship. In 1986, Haas moved into Grand Prix racing, but a major sponsor pulled out within weeks of the team entering Formula One, and the project was abandoned after less than a year. For 1989, the Newman Haas outfit was expanded to 2 cars when Mario's son Michael joined the team. In a CART record-breaking year in 1991, the young Andretti won 8 races and scored 234 points in the championship to secure his first IndyCar crown. A hard-fought defence of the title in 1992 saw Michael lose out by just 4 points after the final race of the series to Bobby Rahal. In August of 1992, the McLaren Grand Prix team announced that it had signed Michael Andretti as one of its drivers for 1993. A few weeks later, the news broke that Nigel Mansell had agreed terms with Newman Haas to race in the 1993 PPG IndyCar World Series.